On the day my wife left, she wasn't crying or looking sad. Instead, she was laughing. It was as if I were the butt of a long-awaited joke. The setting was my late Uncle Gerald's antique shop on Broad Street in Roanoke, Virginia, where she stood amidst the dilapidated display cases, watermarked ceiling tiles, and towers of unwanted dusty furniture. She laughed, as if finding something amusing about it all. "This," Clarissa declared dramatically, gesturing around the shop like a game show host revealing an undesirable prize, "is your inheritance. This is what you've been waiting for." She sighed. "Edmund, I've shown patience, tolerating your museum job, your salary, this town, and even your modest life. But I won't stand in a pile of a dead man's possessions, pretending to accept our situation." I remained silent, still clutching the keys the attorney had given me 2 days before. "Ryan owns a house in McLean," she went on, "property, stock investments, a getaway in the Outer Banks." She casually handled a ceramic figurine from the nearby shelf, inspected it as if it were trash before placing it back, and stated, "And this is what you have here, Edmund. I truly wish you appreciate your inheritance of trinkets." With that, she departed. I was left alone in my late uncle's antique store, enveloped by 4 decades of accumulated relics, the scent of dust, aged wood, and an unfamiliar aroma, and I contemplated numerous aspects. My 11 years of marriage, the museum job I lost 8 months back due to state budget cuts, and the gradual, silent dissolution of a life while still attempting to preserve it. However, mostly I pondered on something Uncle Gerald had told me during our last encounter. His thin fingers held my wrist, and his piercing blue eyes met mine. "Edmund," he said, "everything I possess is yours, but the true gift surpasses what's visible to the eye." Initially, I had dismissed his words as delirious ramblings. However, I was mistaken. If this narrative resonates with you, if you've ever experienced life's rug being torn away only to find footing in an unexpected place, please like and subscribe to my channel. Leave a comment below sharing a moment when something that seemed like a loss transformed into something altogether different. I read every comment carefully. Let me share how a dusty store on Broad Street in Roanoke altered everything for me. My name is Edmund Voss, and at 46, I spent 18 years as the curator at the Western Virginia Museum of Cultural History. While that may sound impressive, there were times it felt otherwise. In terms of American antiques, regional folk art, and pre-Civil War furniture, few in the state could rival my knowledge. I could enter a room and estimate the age of a piece of furniture to within a decade, guess its origin, and appraise its value. However, it seemed I lacked the ability to maintain a marriage. My wife Clarissa and I met when I was 32 and she was 29. She worked in marketing for a downtown Roanoke commercial real estate firm, and she embodied traits that I did not possess: polished, strategic, constantly maneuvering. She enjoyed the distinctiveness of my historical passion and love for old items. This unique aspect of me lasted approximately 6 years. Later on, it became something she termed as being fixated on the past. I question whether our marriage was ever as strong as I perceived, but I had a talent for believing. That was another one of my skills: believing, even when funding for the museum began dwindling. I stood firm in my faith in our life in Roanoke despite Clarissa frequently spending weekends in Northern Virginia under the pretext of networking. I maintained hope even as the evidence accumulated like overdue bills on a kitchen counter. 17 months before Uncle Gerald's passing, the museum forfeited its state funding allocation. The redundancies began with the curatorial team. After 18 years, I was offered a severance package, a handshake, and gratitude for my service. In the subsequent months, I pursued jobs at institutions in Richmond, Charlottesville, Washington, and took on consulting work when opportunities arose, also teaching a weekend seminar at a community college. It was during this period that Clarissa apparently crossed paths with Ryan. This information came to me later from Donna, who lacked the knack for keeping secrets, revealing that Ryan Lasseter was a commercial real estate developer Clarissa had met through a property transaction. At 40 years old, divorced, and with a home in McLean, he represented the package of success and stability that Clarissa believed she deserved. On the day Gerald's lawyer contacted me, I was unaware of the details. My Uncle Gerald was my mother's eldest brother, never married, no children. For most of his adult life, he operated an antique shop on Broad Street in Roanoke, a business he inherited from Ellsworth Haley in 1991 after Haley's demise, although the specific price was something I never learned. The disorganized nature of the store reflected his business acumen, as he had an appreciation for unique items but not necessarily valuable ones. For instance, he purchased a Victorian writing desk for $300 only to sell it decades later for $352 after it sat untouched in his back room. His attachment to certain items made him sentimentally inclined, which hampered good business practices, yet I adored him. After my parents' divorce and the ensuing chaos at home, it was Gerald who drove me through Virginia's countryside, frequenting estate sales and flea markets, instructing me on the importance of careful observation. It was he who gifted me with an appreciation for history by placing a piece of antique furniture in my hands and saying, "Don't just see it, understand it. Each artifact holds a story if you know how to listen." That's why I became a curator, inspired by Gerald. He passed away on a Tuesday morning in his apartment above the shop, aged 71. He had been ill for nearly a year, though he always minimized it when I asked. The attorney, a reserved man named Harlan Prout, contacted me the next day to inform me that Gerald had bequeathed me everything: the shop, its contents, the apartment above, and whatever was in his bank accounts. The accounts contained less than $8,000. Regarding the inventory, Prout shared with me softly, a local appraiser had valued it between $12,000 and $20,000. Primarily Victorian-era mid-grade furniture and ornamental items with minimal market value were predominant. When Prout disclosed the figures, a change occurred in Clarissa's expression, perhaps one that had been gradual over time, ultimately solidifying its form. She remained largely silent that day. She chose to wait until we visited the shop. After Clarissa departed, I spent considerable time in Gerald's store. As usual, when confronted with pain, I turned to work. I began in the front room, meticulously examining the display cases and creating an inventory list as I had been taught. The items were largely as Prout's appraiser described. Good pieces, some of them, nothing extraordinary, a set of pressed glass dinnerware. Some framed botanical art, a collection of pocket watches that would fetch a decent price at auction. An artisanal wooden timepiece from the Pennsylvania German era, possibly dating back to the 1870s, piqued my interest but didn't dramatically alter my existence. Spending the afternoon and night, I had no other commitments. Our residence, a blend of mine and Clarissa's, seemed to be part of an alternate chapter in my life. At around 9, I visited Gerald's apartment upstairs to peruse his personal items. This space was compact, consisting of 2 rooms, a bathroom, and overflowing with books, amassed treasures gathered throughout his lifetime. Stacks of auction catalogs traced back to the 90s, reference texts on American furniture, folk art, ceramics, silver were scattered around. A framed image on his desk depicted us at an estate sale in the Shenandoah Valley. I appeared 22 years old, slim and enthusiastic, displaying an early American pie safe like a gold discovery. Gerald's desk was vintage, a relic itself. 1890 roll-top desk, oak and well-maintained. Upon sitting and examining its drawers, common items such as old letters, receipts, membership cards from antique dealers and associations, an address book filled with collectors, appraisers, and auction houses were found. In the lower right drawer, underneath a folded catalog from a 2004 Sotheby's auction, 2 unusual items were discovered: a heavy brass key adorned with a distinctive bow in the shape of a stylized V letter, and a paper note written by Gerald, whose handwriting I immediately recognized due to its careful, antiquated cursive. The note read, "Edmund. If you're reading this, I'm no longer here and everything in the store is now yours. The contents have been appraised and cataloged, but there are items hidden behind the Eastlake wardrobe in the storage room at the back of the shop. To access it, move the wardrobe first. The mechanism to do so is located on the left baseboard 3rd panel from the corner. I regret not telling you this in person. I meant to. Please forgive an old man for running out of time. The true inheritance lies behind that wall. You'll know how to handle it because I taught you. Gerald." Upon rereading, I made my way downstairs once more. The storage room at the rear of Gerald's shop housed larger unpriced items, overflow stock, and what he referred to as his thinking furniture, pieces he purchased out of interest, unsure of their ultimate fate. The Eastlake wardrobe stood against the back wall, a familiar piece to me. Years ago, Gerald purchased this item from an estate sale in Bedford County. Decorated geometrically in black walnut, it had original hardware, suggesting a possible origin in the 1880s. Not particularly unique for his shop, but a solid find nonetheless. It weighed heavily, and moving it took me 15 minutes and left me winded. However, I managed to move it. Behind the item was a wall section identical to the rest. Upon crouching down, I discovered the third panel from the corner when pressed revealed a soft click. The wall segment, roughly 3 feet wide by 6 feet tall, hinged inwards silently due to recently oiled hinges. Inside the room, approximately 12 feet by 14 feet, were objects that halted me mid-step. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with paintings that made my breath catch and my hands freeze at my sides. 3 on one wall, 3 on another, all enveloped in acid-free archival paper and stationed in self-constructed padded wooden frames. Sandwiched between them, flat files for documentation. On the shelves, items wrapped and labeled by Gerald's handwriting. Many of them. I paused at the entrance of this concealed room before eventually stepping inside. Then I donned the cotton gloves I always carried in my coat pocket, as was my daily habit for the past 18 years, and began to open things. It took me 3 days to comprehensively catalog what Gerald had concealed behind that wall. I worked systematically, as he had taught me, and as the museum had trained me, beginning with readily identifiable items and proceeding carefully to those needing further investigation. I photographed everything. I compared them against auction records and the reference library in Gerald's upstairs apartment. After the first evening, my hands quivered not due to fatigue, but from the scene before me. The initial artwork I unfurled was a tiny landscape, oil on canvas, roughly 10 by 14 inches, depicting undulating hills with a distant farmhouse, illuminated by soft, discerning autumn light. On the reverse side of the frame, faint pencil markings not made by Gerald were visible. A date seemingly 1847, a location that hinted at Virginia, though its entirety was hard to decipher. Flipping the canvas over, I studied the signature in the lower right corner for an extended period. Eventually, my legs ceased functioning, and I sat on the floor of that small room. I won't reveal whose name was signed there just yet, as what follows is crucial. However, I can share that by the time I had inspected all 6 paintings, it became evident that Gerald hadn't managed a junk shop for 4 decades. For 4 decades, my Uncle Gerald, an exceptionally honest man, had been covertly amassing items, not luxurious pieces nor those sought by major auction houses. He obtained these from estate sales where families lacked knowledge of their value, small regional auctions with misidentified or neglected items, and collectors looking to downsize without engaging the mainstream market. He acquired them cheaply, often much less than their true worth due to his keen understanding of their value that eluded most people. He meticulously stored these treasures in a room concealed behind an Eastlake wardrobe, which he eventually passed on to me. On the second morning following this inheritance, my hands still trembling, I reached out to Nora Clement. Nora, a distinguished appraiser in Richmond, excelled in American paintings and decorative arts from the Federal era to the early 20th century on the East Coast. I've collaborated with her on multiple museum acquisitions. She was 63, blunt, accurate, and possessed the unyielding professional ethics of someone who had witnessed a variety of human absurdities over her career. "Hello, Voss," she said upon answering. "I haven't heard from you since the museum predicament." "Are you okay?" I requested her presence to examine something. She recognized the seriousness in my tone based on our history. "When can you come?" she inquired. "Immediately," was my reply. The following day, Nora drove from Richmond to my shop. I greeted her and walked her through the store without comment, led her to the storage area, moved a wardrobe again, and revealed the concealed room. She entered, took a moment to survey, and fell silent. Nora Clement wasn't easily dissuaded. She remained in that room for 4 hours. Using her personal magnifying glass and reference books, which she carried in a leather bag from the car, she spoke infrequently, merely making professional murmurs as she confirmed what she already recognized. Upon leaving, she sat on a wooden crate in the storage area and looked at me. "Edmund," she said cautiously, "where did your uncle acquire these items?" 40 years of purchasing," I replied. "From estate sales, small auctions, private deals." She slowly nodded in agreement. "The Hudson River painting," she started, referring to the third, largest piece that displayed a river view with a dramatically lit sky. "It appears to be consistent with the style of a significant second-generation Hudson River school artist. I would require lab analysis for confirmation, but my initial assessment suggests it's genuine. If it indeed falls within that range, the estimated auction price for the piece lies between $400,000 and $800,000, contingent on the market conditions." She elaborated, referring to the small Virginia landscape painting. Assuming the attribution is confirmed as we believe it will be, she added, this painting could fetch over $1 million, potentially much more, depending on its final catalog placement and the identities of potential bidders. I remained silent. She pointed out two items from the display that warranted her attention again. First, an exceptional early 19th century Pennsylvania German painted furniture piece, specifically a blanket chest, with museum quality. Secondly, she expressed interest in a collection of significant American whaling-era scrimshaw found in the flat files, noting the need for a more thorough examination. She fixed her gaze on me. Let me assure you, Edmund, your uncle was not operating a thrift store. I understand, I replied. He wasn't. What are your plans for all of this? She invited me to sit down across from her. Nora pondered for a moment before suggesting, the paintings necessitate submission to a prominent auction house, such as Christie's or Sotheby's in New York City. The folk art may find more success at a specialized dealer, but prioritizing authentication of the significant paintings is crucial. This involves sending samples and obtaining expert opinions. Expect this process to take approximately 6 to 8 months for accuracy. I acknowledged my ability to wait patiently. She nearly smiled in response. I'm aware you possess that trait, she replied. Rising from her seat, she smoothed her jacket and picked up her bag. By the end of the week, you'll receive a written summary of my preliminary findings, along with Edmund's, she added before stepping towards the storage room door. Your uncle evidently invested several decades amassing the expertise to find pieces like these and the restraint to preserve them. He chose you to carry on his legacy. Don't rush it. He taught me not to, I reminded her. 6 weeks later, my brother-in-law, Clarissa's sibling Derek, unexpectedly contacted me over the phone. Not because he was worried about me, but Derek, characteristically, contacted me about something. He started off casually, hinting at his impending request. Clarissa had suggested the store might not hold much value, asking if I was considering liquidation. A developer was interested in the Broad Street property for commercial renovation, and given the Roanoke real estate market's current state, the building could potentially be worth. I interrupted him, saying, no, the shop isn't for sale. He hesitated before repeating, the building's probably worth more than the inventory by a considerable margin. I reiterated, the shop is not for sale, and ended the call to get back to work. 2 days later, Clarissa phoned. Her tone was altered, serious and cautious. The usual laughter was absent. She inquired about my frequent visits to Gerald's store. I trust everything is well with you. Everything is good, I replied. I felt it necessary to tell you that I acknowledge how challenging our parting was. I could have been more considerate. Yes, I admitted. You certainly were not. There was a brief pause. Derek suggested the property might hold some worth, she mentioned. I understand we're in the midst of legal matters, but if there's any matter concerning the estate to discuss. Clarissa, I said. All items from Gerald's shop were mine prior to our official split, and the property is under my sole ownership as an inheritance. Your lawyer will confirm this, but honestly, I don't believe that's why you're contacting me. Pause. I believe, I said, that someone has shared information with you or you have overheard something and you are checking its validity. More silence. Is there anything in the shop I should be aware of? She questioned, now a hint of suspicion in her tone, as if she might have made a miscalculation. Everything that was Gerald's was bequeathed to me, I stated. I've been managing it according to his wishes. That sums it up. I disconnected the call. The verification procedure lasted 9 months. During this period, I resided in Gerald's apartment above the store. I cataloged each item in the concealed room. I commenced selling the standard stock via the shop, operating it as Gerald did, gradually, meticulously, without coercion. I consulted on a few local estate sales to maintain a steady income flow. Nora dispatched 2 trusted associates, an expert on paintings from the National Gallery and a specialist in folk art from the Winterthur Museum, to assess the significant pieces. The Virginia landscape was authenticated in February. The painter was notable, not the most renowned American artist who ever lived, but a name that discerning collectors recognized and auction houses approached with genuine interest. 20 years of careful storage under controlled temperature and humidity in darkness had made the condition extraordinary. Nora phoned me the day the authenticity confirmation letter arrived. Edmund, she said, are you seated? I replied in the affirmative. The letter verifies the attribution, she continued, which means you possess a painting valued between $1.2 million and $1.8 million, a fairly conservative range. Already, discreet inquiries have come from two significant collections. For a moment, I contemplated this information. The Hudson River artwork has also been verified, she added. Its value is estimated to be between $600,000 and $800,000. The Pennsylvania German blanket chest, evaluated by the folk art specialist from Winterthur, is considered the finest example of its type currently held privately. She's preparing a paper on it for publication. Edmund, the chest itself would fetch a minimum of $300,000 in an appropriate auction, I calculated silently. Nora, I said, the approximate total worth of the items in this room. Approximately, she replied, between $3 and $4 million, potentially more if the major paintings prove successful. The Scrimshaw collection, following a third evaluation, is valued between $200,000 and $300,000. Gerald's Antique Shop on Broad Street, Roanoke, Virginia. An inheritance of various items. $3 to $4 million, meticulously amassed over 40 years by a man who recognized the disparity between value and price, and placed his trust in me to discern that distinction. I didn't head straight to Christie's. Instead, I contacted a former colleague from my museum days, Philip Ockhaffer, now working in the specialist department at Sotheby's, New York. On a Wednesday in mid-March at Sotheby's, Nora and I faced Philip and two of his specialists, a painting expert and a decorative arts specialist. Our evidence photographs and authentication documents were on the conference table, with the actual items still back in Roanoke. The room's reaction mirrored my 18 years as a curator, controlled, professional excitement. After scrutinizing our papers, Philip coughed, signaling readiness. Edmund, he asked, when can we visit Roanoke? They arrived the following week. Three individuals wearing white cotton gloves moved gently and respectfully as they handled items of recognized value, under soft lighting. Approximately 3 weeks after this event, the Virginia landscape was shipped to New York in a climate-controlled, $2 million insured vehicle. This piece was sold at an auction in May for $1,400,000. The Hudson River painting followed in October and fetched $720,000. Prior to the auction, a major American museum privately purchased the blanket chest for a price, reportedly, the highest ever paid for a piece of Pennsylvania German painted furniture. By year-end, I had netted roughly $2 million from Gerald's secret room, post-taxes, commissions, and expenses. Let me share with you how I used that sum. I didn't invest in a McLean house nor a vacation property. I failed to perform actions intended to impress Clarissa, which I later recognized was precisely the intention. I hadn't aimed to impress Clarissa. Instead, I strived to live a genuine life. I purchased Gerald's shop, not the property, as I already owned it. I acquired the shop's future. I appropriately restored the storage area, maintained the front room as a gallery and antique space, and established what I dubbed the Voss Haley Collection, named in honor of Gerald and the man who initially allowed him to work in that building. Half of the folk art from the concealed room, pieces not sold at auction, were added to this collection, which I made accessible to researchers and curators by appointment. I recruited a woman named Priya Mehta, 28 years old, a recent graduate of the University of Virginia's art history program, as an assistant. She was undeniably the most intelligent individual I interviewed, and she shared Gerald's unique quality, the ability to truly perceive an object. I resumed consulting, this time from a stable standpoint instead of necessity. During the subsequent 18 months, I assisted 3 regional museums with acquisitions. I penned 2 scholarly articles, one discussing Hudson River paintings and their provenance records, another focusing on the underappreciated items circulating in estate sales collecting market, particularly in the regional context. Teaching also became a part of my life again, not at the weekend community college as before, but a full-fledged university course, one semester annually at the University of Virginia, covering American material culture and the art of observation, inspired by Gerald's teachings prior to my museum visits. 8 months after Clarissa left the shop, the divorce was finalized. It was straightforward. She had already established a new life with Ryan Lasseter and McLean. Her lawyer merely inquired about the estate, to which my lawyer responded with necessary documentation. Inheritances are considered separate property. No disagreement was present. From Derek, I learned that Clarissa was angered upon learning about the auction results. The sale of the Virginia landscape received minor attention in an art magazine that circulated among certain groups, and somehow the name Voss became noticeable enough that individuals who knew us in Roanoke linked the dots. It was said she claimed I had concealed it from her. However, I hadn't been hiding anything. Instead, I found it after she had left. On a Thursday evening in late November, around 14 months since Gerald passed away, I returned to the shop when Priya was absent for the day. I locked the front door and walked through the place alone. The Eastlake wardrobe remained against the wall in the storage room, but the secret room behind it was now vacant as the items had moved on to their new destinations, auction houses, museums, and collectors who, hopefully, appreciated their value. I pushed the third panel from the corner of the baseboard. The door opened. I stood in the empty room for a moment. Gerald had likely stood in this room multiple times across various years, scrutinizing his amassed items, conscious of their significance for future purposes. Despite being a collector rather than a peddler, he embodied the same essence as myself, a dedication to the notion that objects bear meaning, and our choices to conserve and protect such artifacts reveal aspects of ourselves. The distinctions between value, price, and wisdom were equally important to both of us, with patience being a manifestation of wisdom itself. In my jacket pocket, I retrieved his note which I had preserved since the evening I found it. The hidden treasure behind that wall is your true inheritance. You'll understand how to handle it because I taught you. Indeed, he was correct. I had comprehended not only the paintings and folk art, but also the essence of discernment, seeing beyond superficiality to grasp an item's genuine nature. 40 years he persisted, defying the urge to evaluate everything based on market value. He clung steadfastly to what truly mattered, despite others deeming it valueless. As I locked up the store and stepped onto Broad Street, November's icy breath from the Blue Ridge Mountains whispered through the air, sharpening its taste. Quiet was the street, the shop window lights flickering on the remaining items within. For a moment I stood there, hands tucked away, merely gazing. My uncle bequeathed me more than wealth. He gave me evidence that a life lived in accordance with one's own values, rather than others, is the most rare and precious of possessions. Sometimes, when you learn to truly see, you realize that what the world deems worthless was never valueless at all. Waiting for someone who understood its worth was all it needed. What struck me most about Edmund's tale wasn't the money. Instead, it was the fact that his uncle went unrecognized for 40 years and never sought to prove others wrong. He merely persisted, accumulated, and held faith in what he believed was genuine. And I believe many of us carry something similar, a talent, a passion, or an undervalued wisdom yet to be acknowledged. Let no one else's impatience breed self-doubt within you. The right individual will always perceive the true worth in you. Share below what you feel people in your life have underestimated about you. I'm genuinely curious. If stories like this resonate with you, subscribe for more.